March 17th, 2024. 2:43 a.m. Hawaii Standard Time. Atop the volcanic ridges of Haleakala Observatory, an automated telescope began recording an anomaly, a pulse that shouldn't have existed. The telescope was part of an international monitoring network known as 3i Atlas, short for Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. Its purpose was simple: to detect near-Earth asteroids before they reached us. But that morning, it detected something else. A signal, faint, rhythmic, and structured. Every 9.6 seconds it repeated, perfectly. Too perfect to be noise. At first, researchers thought it was interference, maybe a satellite ping, maybe a terrestrial reflection. But when cross-checked with Chile and South Africa, the same pulse appeared. Identical timing, identical signature. It wasn't random. It wasn't an echo. It was something designed. For decades, scientists have dreamed of this moment. A trace, a sign, a whisper from the void. But when it finally arrived, it didn't come from distant galaxies or a far-off star. It came from somewhere much closer. Right here, within our own solar system. In the early hours after detection, technicians checked for terrestrial interference. All radar channels were quiet. No atmospheric anomalies, no military transmissions. Yet the pulse continued, unwavering, unchanging. It wasn't bouncing from Earth. It wasn't drifting. It was holding position in a narrow corridor between Earth and Mars. The first official internal report labelled it a non-natural repeating signal pattern. That's a sanitized way of saying we have no idea what this is. To understand why this event shook the scientific community, we need to look at how astronomers define randomness. Natural signals, pulsars, quasars, magnetars, they all produce rhythms, but those rhythms change, they decay, they fluctuate. This one didn't. The amplitude, the period, the spacing, identical down to 1/10,000,000th of a second. No natural emitter maintains that level of precision. The universe doesn't work in perfect metronomes, only machines do. Machines, but whose? Over the next 48 hours, 3 more observatories confirmed the same reading. 3i Atlas Chile, Atlas Sutherland in South Africa, and a private array in Canberra all recorded the same pulse. When they triangulated the direction, the results stunned everyone. The source appeared to be near the southern hemisphere of Mars, close to a region known as Hellas Planitia, one of the largest impact basins in the solar system. But there's something unusual about that region. Under its surface, radar scans have hinted at dense subsurface reflections, possibly frozen water, maybe salt plains. Yet none of those should produce structured electromagnetic emissions, unless something there is active. By March 20th, 2024, news of the anomaly leaked through internal networks. A short technical brief was published on NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory portal and immediately taken down. The cached version described a repetitive, non-random signal detected near the Martian equatorial zone. Hours later, NASA's spokesperson called it a data glitch. Routine calibration noise, they said. The statement ended with a single line: there is no evidence of intelligent origin. But inside the 3i Atlas network, researchers knew the data was solid. The pattern had survived redundancy tests across multiple instruments, each using separate atomic clocks. The chance of coincidence was less than 1 in a billion. So if it wasn't a glitch, what was it? Science lives on skepticism. Every discovery must face doubt. Every claim must face proof. But sometimes, the data speaks too loudly to ignore. Imagine being one of those scientists, sitting in the dark control room, watching your monitor blink in perfect, endless rhythm, knowing that every pulse might mean you're no longer alone. How do you react to that? Do you tell the world, or do you wait and risk being the scientist who cried alien? Some say the team was instructed to go silent. Others believe they chose silence on their own, waiting for verification before igniting global panic. 3 days after the initial detection, a sub-analysis revealed something no one expected. Hidden within the repeating signal was a modulation, a faint, almost imperceptible phase shift occurring every 7th pulse. It wasn't random distortion, it formed a sequence, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, the first 6 prime numbers. Prime numbers, the mathematical fingerprint of intelligence. The Atlas software flagged it as an intentional structure, and suddenly everything changed. No natural object, no magnetar, no solar burst has ever emitted prime sequences. It's considered one of the universal markers SETI researchers have waited for since the 1970s, because any civilization, human or alien, would recognize primes as proof of logic. That's when 3i Atlas quietly sent a classified report to the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. For the first time in recorded history, an official channel labelled a signal as potentially artificial and non-terrestrial. The media never saw that memo, but insiders did, and one of them leaked it. As the days passed, analysts began comparing the signal's strength curve with known Mars orbiters. Curiously, the amplitude increased whenever the signal aligned with the sunlit side of the planet. That shouldn't happen, unless the transmission was reflecting from something metallic. NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter captured a reflective anomaly, roughly triangular, appearing for 6 consecutive orbits, then vanishing completely. Whatever it wasn't there before, and it hasn't been seen since. At 10:11 p.m. UTC on March 26, 2024, a secondary pulse appeared, slightly weaker, but following the same interval. And then, for the first time, the pulse responded. Scientists increased sensitivity. The pulse mirrored back, exactly half a second delayed. A feedback loop, a dialogue. It wasn't random, it was interacting. If you were in that control room, you might have felt it. That sense of being watched, not from above, but from across the dark. A presence not visible, but undeniably aware. For over 60 years, humans have sent messages into the void. Golden records, encoded radio waves, mathematical greetings. But maybe, just maybe, the first message we'll receive won't come from another star. It'll come from right next door. By the end of March 2024, 3i Atlas data streams were reclassified as restricted. Public access vanished overnight. No official reason given. The timing, exactly 24 hours after the pulse replied. And yet the signal didn't stop. Amateur astronomers continued to detect faint traces, weaker, distorted but still repeating, like an echo whispering through the void. How is that even possible? A repeating structured signal, prime number modulation, origin, Mars. If this is real, then everything we know about being alone in the universe is about to change. March 18th, 2024. Less than 24 hours after the first anomaly was logged, data analysts from the Atlas control node in Hawaii began to notice something else hidden in the recordings. The pulse wasn't just a burst of energy, it carried structure, depth and rhythm, almost like a heartbeat layered within a code. Every repetition contained a fractional delay, one that shifted exactly by 0.0016 seconds at intervals of 40 cycles. That shift was not random, it was controlled, it had intent. By sunrise, data from the other hemispheric observatories began to align. Chile, South Africa and Australia all reported the same signal with identical intervals, showing that it wasn't an atmospheric echo or a ground-based reflection. Whatever this was, it was beyond the Earth, consistent across hemispheres, and timed to perfection. The internal logs were archived and encrypted. A small circle of researchers from the 3i Atlas consortium were given clearance to continue the analysis. They worked in silence, knowing that one misinterpretation could either ignite a worldwide frenzy or bury the greatest finding in modern history. The discovery phase began not with excitement, but with disbelief. The first task was to eliminate every known cause of false positives, radar interference, geostationary satellites, deep space probes, and solar flares. Each possibility was tested and discarded. The signal did not behave like any known satellite. It maintained its strength, even when Mars passed behind solar plasma, which should have scrambled or extinguished any human-made transmission. It persisted. Cold, steady, mathematical. At its core, the pulse carried a specific frequency band, between 1.420 and 1.424 GHz. This range is known as the hydrogen line, a naturally quiet band of the electromagnetic spectrum. It is often called the cosmic waterhole, the region where scientists have long expected intelligent life might choose to communicate. Hydrogen, the simplest and most abundant element in the universe, represents a universal constant. Any species advanced enough to use radio frequencies would understand it. The use of that frequency range wasn't coincidence. It was a deliberate choice. The researchers replayed the data on a loop for hours. The pulse was haunting, hypnotic, unrelenting. It was as if someone, or something, was tapping on the door of reality with patient precision. A private communication thread between 3 principal investigators began to record their thoughts. We can't be sure it's artificial, but nothing else explains this symmetry. It's not a pulsar, not a quasar. I checked the database. No known source within that region fits the pattern. The hydrogen line! Why the hydrogen line? Days later, the international media caught a faint whisper of the event through a minor online astronomy forum. An amateur radio enthusiast had noticed a faint spike at 1.421 GHz and posted about it. Within hours, the thread was deleted, but screenshots survived, spreading across small corners of the internet. The words "unexplained signal" and "Mars corridor" began appearing in obscure posts. Inside 3i Atlas, the tension rose. Silence was no longer enough. Something had to be done. By March 22nd, a dedicated task group was assembled, composed of astronomers, data scientists, and 2 representatives from SETI. Their mission was to verify and document the signal scientifically, beyond speculation. They began cataloguing every detection. Each observatory's equipment calibration was cross-checked. Environmental conditions were logged. Atmospheric noise indexes were compared. The results were astonishing. Across 14 separate detections, the signal structure remained identical. Nature doesn't repeat itself with that kind of precision. The decision was made to perform a triangulation test. By comparing the timing delays between observatories, the team could calculate the source's position with remarkable accuracy. When the coordinates were plotted, a single region lit up: 38.9 degrees south, 103.4 degrees east on Mars, a place known as the edge of Hellas Planitia. It wasn't random, it wasn't diffuse, it was localized. The coordinates matched a section of the Martian surface that had previously shown unusual reflectivity in radar scans taken by ESA's Mars Express orbiter in 2019. At the time, scientists believed it might have been frozen saline water or mineral deposits. But now, something there seemed to be active, transmitting. The team was divided. Half of them insisted it was geological. The other half began to suspect the unthinkable, that something under the surface had switched on. Additional measurements confirmed that the pulse contained 2 modulations, one constant, one variable. The variable modulation fluctuated in a range that seemed to encode numerical information. When plotted visually, it formed repeating sequences that corresponded roughly to binary patterns. When translated, those sequences aligned with prime number intervals and ratios of hydrogen spectral lines. In simpler terms, the signal was encoding mathematics. One of the analysts described it in his notes. It's as if someone is testing our ability to recognize the simplest universal pattern before moving forward. By March 25th, a preliminary paper was prepared for restricted distribution under the title Anomalous Non-Terrestrial Repetitive Signal Detection within Mars Geosynchronous Vector, March 2024. It never reached public release. Hours before submission, the servers hosting the data were taken offline. Access keys were revoked. Internal memos mentioned coordination with partner agencies. Still, fragments of the data escaped. Backups existed on local drives, and those drives would later confirm that the signal continued for 19 days before fading completely. In those 19 days, researchers noticed another anomaly. The signal grew stronger whenever the Atlas telescopes aligned with the Martian sunrise. During local Martian dawn, the pulse intensified, as though the transmitter, whatever it was, responded to sunlight. If it were an ancient machine, it might have been dormant for millennia, awakening only when the right conditions returned. This idea, once dismissed as fantasy, began to spread quietly among researchers. They started asking forbidden questions. Could Mars have once hosted something more than microbial life? Could remnants of an ancient civilization still exist beneath its icy crust? These were dangerous questions, but they refused to die. Every test designed to disprove the signal's authenticity ended up confirming its precision. Even NASA's Deep Space Communication Network, when pointed near the source, recorded faint harmonics consistent with the Atlas readings. Someone suggested testing for polarization drift, a subtle shift that occurs when signals pass through magnetic or plasma fields. The results shocked everyone. The polarization was constant, unchanging, as if it were being artificially stabilized. Natural signals scatter and weaken. This one didn't. It held its integrity, even across astronomical distances. Days later, new data arrived from an unexpected source. A small amateur radio observatory in Japan detected the same pulse, but with a curious addition: a faint echo 0.48 seconds later, slightly delayed. When analysed, the echo matched the transmission pattern inverted. It was like a mirror reply. That detail changed everything. The discovery phase evolved into a coordinated international effort. Quietly, without public acknowledgement, researchers from Japan, Germany, and the US shared encrypted data streams. They confirmed the signal wasn't a glitch, wasn't Earth-based, and wasn't a known spacecraft. And yet, no one dared to declare it extraterrestrial. The word was too heavy, too final. Instead, they called it structured emission of unknown origin. By the end of March, the pattern shifted again. This time, instead of repeating primes, the signal introduced gaps, pauses between sequences. When decoded using the hydrogen-to-oxygen ratio as a key, the pattern roughly translated into ratios corresponding to the dimensions of a sphere. That ratio matched the curvature of Mars itself. It was as if the signal was identifying its home. Skeptics tried to tear the idea apart. They claimed solar interference, equipment crosstalk, or atmospheric distortion. But the consistency across hemispheres defied every natural explanation. The more they tried to disprove it, the stronger the evidence became. A confidential message circulated among the team. If this is an artificial transmission, then the sender either understands our observation systems or has been watching them. One senior engineer wrote in his diary, "We've spent decades listening for voices from beyond the stars. We never thought the first whisper would come from our neighbor." The discovery phase ended on a moment that no one could have predicted. On April 1st, the signal abruptly changed. Instead of the familiar prime number pattern, the transmission flattened into a single steady tone lasting precisely 10 minutes. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than any noise. And just before it ended, a final modulation appeared, a frequency shift that spelled, in binary approximation, the number 3,4,5,4,5,4,5, PAL, a universal constant, the symbol of geometry, intelligence, and communication. It was the last message before everything went quiet. The researchers didn't sleep that night. They replayed the data again and again, watching the last pulse fade into static. Some wept. Others stared in disbelief. It was no longer about proof. It was about meaning. They had found something that shouldn't exist. A signal that spoke in the language of the universe itself. And though they didn't yet understand it, they all felt the same realization forming in their minds. Something out there had reached back. Something was trying to say hello. But here's where it gets really strange. For weeks after the initial reports of 3I Atlas, astronomers around the world tried to classify it as just another interstellar visitor. Perhaps like Oumuamua, the cigar-shaped object that had once puzzled scientists in 2017. But soon, the data began to defy every known pattern. The first contradiction appeared in the object's trajectory. According to standard models of gravitational motion, anything entering our solar system from deep space should follow a predictable arc, accelerating near the sun, then slowing as it departs. But 3I Atlas didn't follow that rule. It accelerated away from the sun. Instruments on the Subaru telescope and the European Space Observatory both confirmed it. The object wasn't losing speed, it was gaining. That single detail shattered expectations. Natural comets or asteroids can't simply throttle up. The only known explanation for such movement is an external propulsion force, something active, something controlled. Next came the reflectivity data. Using spectroscopic analysis, NASA's infrared telescope facility detected strange uniform reflections from the surface of 3I Atlas, reflections that didn't behave like ice, metal, or rock. Instead, they were consistent with polished composites, materials that, to human knowledge, don't occur naturally. Astronomer Dr. Lian Chen from the Chinese Academy of Sciences summarized the confusion best. It's either made of something we've never seen before, or someone built it. Then came the third anomaly, radio silence where there should have been chaos. Normally, objects that heat up near the sun produce gas outbursts detectable by deep space sensors. 3I Atlas, however, emitted nothing. No outgassing, no debris tail, no visible jets. It was perfectly clean, controlled, and silent. At this stage, even skeptics began to waver. Researchers compared its trajectory to artificial satellites. Its motion seemed deliberate, almost calculated. When one observatory in Chile plotted its speed curve, they noticed something even more disturbing. The acceleration intervals formed a repeating numeric pattern, multiples of 1.618, the golden ratio. This was no cosmic coincidence. Nature does display the golden ratio, yes, but not in flight dynamics, not in space navigation. That's a signature of design, or at least of purpose. As the data poured in, international agencies began to argue. Was this a data processing glitch, a measurement error, or was someone, adjusting its course from afar? Scientists expected randomness. What they got was order. They expected dust and debris. What they found was precision, and they expected silence from the cosmos. But 3I Atlas responded with mathematical whispers that seemed almost alive. Then came the event that changed everything. On the fourth week of observation, the object suddenly stopped moving, mid-trajectory, just beyond Mars's orbit. For 72 hours, it held perfectly still relative to the stars, as if watching, waiting, observing us. Then, without warning, it rotated, its reflective surface catching the sunlight in a way that sent a focused beam toward Earth's direction. The beam wasn't radio or light or heat, it was something else. Detectors at multiple observatories caught a spike in quantum noise, a subtle fluctuation in the vacuum itself, almost like a signature, a message. This was the moment scientists began to question everything they knew about physics, astronomy, and intelligent life. Because if 3I Atlas could stop, observe, and communicate, then it wasn't just an interstellar rock, it was something aware. And as one anonymous researcher from the European Space Agency quietly put it, this was the day the universe stopped being silent. What do you think is happening here? Was this an alien probe observing us, or a fragment of something much larger still coming? After weeks of confusion and mounting tension, the global scientific community began to divide into two camps. Those who believed 3I Atlas was a natural but misunderstood cosmic anomaly, and those who quietly suspected it was something else. The first camp, the traditionalists, clung to data and probability. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, said Dr. Harold Voss, a senior astrophysicist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We've seen objects defy expectations before. We should not jump to conclusions. Unexplained does not mean extraterrestrial. But even as Dr. Voss spoke on live television, new observations were emerging that refused to fit the natural explanation. Across the Atlantic, Professor Amara Rui of the European Southern Observatory had been analysing the light curve data, how 3I Atlas reflected sunlight over time. It doesn't just rotate, she said in a press release. It oscillates, like a machine compensating for imbalance. No natural body does that. Her team also discovered that the oscillation wasn't random. The frequency followed a rhythm that matched a binary code sequence, alternating intervals of a light and shadow that repeated every 6.1 hours. When decoded into binary digits, the pattern translated into 3 repeating prime numbers: 3, 7, 11. No one could explain why. Meanwhile, deep in the data archives of the Square Kilometre Array in South Africa, radio astronomer Dr. Kaito Morishima made a discovery that forced everyone to listen. While analysing the quantum noise spike detected days earlier, his algorithms isolated an intentional modulation hidden inside it. It's not random interference, he said. It's structured. It's a signal. When plotted graphically, the modulation resembled a triangular waveform, 3 distinct peaks repeating over and over again, resembling the Greek letter delta. In signal theory, delta means change. Dr. Morishima presented his findings in a closed-door meeting between NASA, ESA, and the Japanese Space Agency. The report, later leaked online, contained one chilling line under interpretation. Possible intelligent origin, unidentified structure. From there, the debate exploded. Some experts proposed that 3I Atlas might be an ancient derelict probe, a fragment of alien technology adrift for millennia. Others countered that it could be a natural body coated in exotic compounds, reflecting signals in a way that mimics intelligence. The most controversial voice came from Dr. Elena Petrov, a quantum physicist from Moscow State University, who had been studying vacuum field disturbances for over a decade. She claimed the object wasn't sending a signal at all. It was responding to one. When the sun emitted a powerful coronal burst 3 days before the first signal, Petrov explained, the radiation intensity spiked. 3I Atlas reacted, like a mirror that flinched. It wasn't broadcasting, it was awakening. Her statement sent shockwaves through the community. What if 3I Atlas wasn't just a probe, but a sentient construct, something that sleeps between stars until energy wakes it? NASA publicly dismissed the idea, but behind closed doors, analysts began comparing 3I Atlas's patterns to known propulsion models. The acceleration bursts matched theoretical designs for light sails. Technology humanity itself had only begun to test. One classified document from a defense research division, leaked by a whistleblower, summarized the internal conclusion. If this trajectory is artificial, it demonstrates control over solar energy far beyond our capacity. Whoever built it mastered interstellar navigation. Suddenly, the question shifted from what 3I Atlas was to who sent it and why it stopped here. As the weeks passed, media frenzy erupted, conspiracy channels speculated wildly, and scientific institutions scrambled to maintain credibility. Every telescope pointed skyward. Every nation wanted answers. And yet, amid all the theories, equations, and denials, one truth began to surface, quietly, almost reluctantly. Humanity wasn't just observing the universe anymore. The universe was observing us back. Here's the kicker. New spectral readings from the James Webb Space Telescope revealed something extraordinary. 3I Atlas wasn't alone. Beyond its reflective hull, faint but consistent energy signatures indicated 2 smaller objects trailing behind it, perfectly synchronized, moving as if in formation. The era of coincidence was over. The discovery that 3I Atlas was not alone changed everything. Suddenly, this was no longer just about a single mysterious visitor. It was about intent, about coordination, about intelligence on a scale that humanity had never faced before. Every government, every space agency, every defense alliance began asking the same question. What does this mean for us? The implications were staggering. If these objects were artificial, then humanity was no longer the only civilization capable of controlled interstellar travel. That realization alone rewrote centuries of human philosophy, science, and even religion. The cosmos was no longer a silent expanse of gas and rock. It was inhabited, and one of its inhabitants had found us first. But the implications went even deeper. Technological implications. If 3I Atlas and its companions were indeed operating under some form of propulsion or self-sustaining energy field, it meant that we were witnessing a technology thousands, maybe millions of years ahead of our own. The light sail-like acceleration patterns, the flawless formation movement, the controlled quantum emissions, all of it pointed to mastery over energy and matter at a fundamental level. Physicists began whispering about possibilities once thought impossible, harnessing quantum vacuum energy, manipulating space-time curvature, traveling between stars not through fuel, but through resonance. Dr. Kaito Morishima said it best during an off-record interview that was later leaked online. If we can reverse engineer even 1% of what 3I Atlas does, it would revolutionize our civilization. We wouldn't just explore the galaxy, we'd join it. Scientific implications. Every branch of science was shaken. Cosmology, quantum physics, astrobiology. all suddenly had to confront the possibility that intelligent design was at play beyond Earth. The golden ratio trajectory, the mathematical signal, the synchronization, these weren't coincidences. For centuries, humanity had asked, are we alone? Now, the evidence suggested that the real question might be, why us? Why now? Some scientists propose that 3I Atlas might not be a probe of conquest or communication, but a marker, a beacon signaling a phase in humanity's technological development, as if someone had been watching, waiting for us to reach a certain level of advancement before revealing themselves. Others feared it was the opposite, that the object's silence wasn't curiosity but calculation. Philosophical and societal implications. Religious leaders called it the awakening of the sky. Some saw 3I Atlas as a divine messenger, a cosmic test of faith. Others declared it proof that creation itself was universal, that intelligence was woven into the fabric of reality. Meanwhile, ordinary people stared at the night sky differently. Stargazers turned their telescopes toward Mars' orbit, hoping for a glimpse. Social media erupted with hashtags, like CASA's first contact of "They are here" and Atlas signal. Governments, however, were not celebrating. Secret defense briefings labeled the situation as potential non-human contact scenario level 1. Military satellites were repositioned. Deep space listening arrays were recalibrated. Plans that had existed only in classified contingency archives were quietly reactivated. Humanity, for the first time in history, was preparing not for discovery, but for encounter. What if possibilities? What if these objects are not probes but invitations? What if they have been waiting for us to respond? What if, in our silence, we are already communicating more than we know? What if, and this is what sends chills down the spine of every scientist involved, we were never the ones discovering them at all? Perhaps we are the ones being studied. The world's media called it the cosmic mirror moment, because when we looked into the sky that week, what we saw looking back at us wasn't just an alien mystery. It was a reflection of our own curiosity, fear and ambition, magnified by light years. In a global conference, Dr. Elena Petrov made a statement that echoed through every scientific and philosophical circle. 3I/Atlas is not just an object. It's a message about what it means to be intelligent, to reach out into the dark and finally be seen. The question everyone began asking was no longer what is it, but what happens next? Are we witnessing the dawn of interstellar communication? Or are we standing at the edge of something much larger? Something that humanity may not yet be ready for? Are we witnessing a major shift in space science? Or the first moment of contact? In the cold silence beyond Mars, 3I/Atlas stopped moving. It hovered, motionless, as if watching. Then came a single pulse. Instruments around the world detected it. A low gravitational tremor that rippled through space itself. No light, no radio, no debris. Just a silent vibration, measured but deliberate. Dr. Harold Voss broke the news. We are no longer observing, we are being observed. Hours later, all three objects emitted a synchronized flash. Bright, triangular, lasting just seconds. The data revealed a simple numeric pattern. 1, 4, 9. The squares of the first three numbers. A code of order, a message of intent. Those numbers map to one location. A point in Earth's orbit we'll reach in 6 months. Scientists are calling it the rendezvous point. Now the world waits, unsure if it's an invitation, a test, or something far greater. Maybe this isn't about them arriving. Maybe it's about us being ready. The silence of the universe is over, and the next chapter of humanity's story is about to begin. Subscribe. Next week we'll explore the decoded Atlas signal and what it might mean for first contact.